Welcome everybody back to this live stream. Sterling, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing okay. I'm a little sore today, so I'm moving a little slow, thinking a little slow. How about
Yeah.
yourself?
I could be doing a little bit better, a little bit sick at the moment, but you know what? We're gonna get through it. But last week was a very exciting week one. Obviously, we talked a little bit about it throughout our video earlier this week, but it was still really interesting weeks. Obviously, a couple of upsets that happened. Obviously, I think the biggest upset we could probably say was the Steelers beating the Cincinnati Bengals in overtime. The reason I think biggest upset is because I think all of us thought the Steelers defense was going to be good, which it was, but we didn't necessarily think the Bengals offense would look that poor.
Well, I don't know if it's so much the Bengals offense looked that poor. The Steelers defense was really good that day.
It was.
And they just, as much as the Bengals added to that front line, they couldn't protect Joe Burrow still. Alex Kappa had a couple of bright moments opening up some holes for Joe Mixon, but as far as protecting Joe Burrow, they didn't do a great job of it.
No, not really. Again, I think it was a total of like 7 sacks for that game, which, if you gave up 90 sacks the year before, to open up the year giving off 7 while you tried to upgrade your offensive line, and it looked like you upgraded your offensive line. That is not a good look at all. But yeah, the kicking situation in that game as well is what really kept that game going on and on and on, because the Bengals ultimately missed, I think it was like 3 at the end of the game and then going into overtime, and then obviously the Steelers missing 1. Hopefully now that's the new double doink situation that we hear. But finally, no, not happening.
No, because we still won.
Yeah.
If we had lost, then sure.
You
redeemed themselves same game, so it's all good.
That's very true. But yeah, that honestly, it's really unfortunate that TJ Watt went down in that game. Ultimately, like, that's gonna hurt your team, because the dude was looking like he was gonna break the sack record this year. Obviously, he had 2 sacks in that game, sack and a half.
Yes.
Which,
sack and a half or 2 sacks. I believe it was Alex Highsmith that led the team in sacks with 3 that game, though.
Still, but with the threat of TJ Watt not out there, going to be a little bit more challenging for sure. But we'll get back to the Steelers. Another upset that we're looked at is the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Washington Commanders, with the Washington Commanders beating the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously upset because we looked at the Jaguars and said this is a vastly improved team. Doug Peterson with Trevor Lawrence, they should look really good. And we looked at the Commanders and went, they have Carson Wentz at their starting quarterback spot. I think both of us were really shocked by the actual outcome of that game, because it was not one of those situations where we thought the Commanders would win. And Carson Wentz didn't necessarily look great either. Didn't look bad.
No, there was a lot of that last week, honestly, week 1.
Yeah.
A lot of games where, the team you don't expect to win just comes out and surprises everybody.
Yeah. Again, looking at that, since even the Saints and Falcons game was really close. The Saints, or the Falcons, I should say, did manage to blow another lead. That's they just love doing that. Poor Falcons fan. Every single time you have a significant lead, it's like, well, we're gonna blow this. Great.
It's got to make Matt Ryan feel good, though, because he's got to be looking at that going, oh, hey, it's not just me. See, it's the Falcons. It's not Matt Ryan. It's the Falcons.
Yeah, well, Matt Ryan's new team, they tied against Houston. This is a team that they should have just walked all over, but yet
the Indianapolis... And who punts the ball in overtime with 20 seconds left? I don't care if it's 4th down. There's 20 seconds left. It's like, you know what? Go for it.
Yeah. This is at that point you were just accepting the fact that you were going to tie.
Yeah.
I guess realistically you're looking at that going we would rather have a tie than a loss, but at the same point, I also don't remember where the punt was from. If it was from their own 20-yard line, I'm like, yeah, punt the ball.
I think it was about the 40-45, their own 40-45. So going for it and missing, it's a long field goal to win the game, like 54, 55 yards.
Yeah. It's a tough decision for sure, but it's
It
one of
is.
those decisions for Frank Reich. I think he looked at it and going, you know what? If I punt the ball, I'm guaranteed a tie. But if we go for it and we don't get it, then it's a chance that we'll lose. So again, it's one of those things. Go for it if it's 20 seconds, but it's also, would we rather risk the loss or kind of more guarantee a tie? And yeah,
Fair, and I
another,
mean, you look back to last season, and one of the teams that had the tie last year, was the difference maker for whether they made the playoffs or not. So
this is true. And then
yeah,
another surprising game that we looked at was the Giants beating the Tennessee Titans. Just like, obviously Saquon Barkley had a phenomenal game, but that
yep,
was another one of those ones where it was like, all right, well, the Titans are going to walk over the Giants and let's move on.
yep.
Like that was kind of our approach to that game, was just like, okay, and we're done. Which,
Well, and Derrick Henry looks human. Like
right?
there was one hit in that game where like you saw him go flying, and it's like, wait, you can hit Derrick Henry like that?
Yeah.
I think it probably surprised him too. He's probably not been hit like that since he was 12 years old.
When he was normal human size. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, like, it was one of those things where the Titans lost to the Giants. Like,
Yep.
saying that with a Daniel Jones led Giants, you don't really hear a lot of Daniel Jones led Giants beating anyone,
No.
let alone a team that finished with the first overall seed in the AFC last year.
Right, but this is a Tennessee Titans team that we were all surprised they finished first last year, because this is a Ryan Tannehill led offense. And
Yes.
you know, we all sort of speculated last year that maybe this was a one-off, just a luck of the draw type of thing that they got. And I
Yeah.
think we're seeing that might be the case.
I think so as well, but another close game and an upset that happened was my Chicago Bears beating the San Francisco 49ers in what is now being called the Mud Bowl, which,
Yep.
if you watch the game, that is rightfully so. But as a Bears fan, that game was a heart attack in a bottle, because you know what? It was such a roller coaster of emotions, because at the start of the game, I hated my team. I had already given up on the season. Justin Fields threw a really, really bad interception that I'm just sitting back going like, all right, like, here I go. Like, I woke up last Sunday going like, yep, I'm ready for pain and upset. And
I remember because we did our pod late last week, so we did it last Sunday morning right before the
yep.
games.
Yeah, you and I, obviously, both of our games were on at the same time, but we're sitting there texting each other, and opening, I got very, very quiet, was saying a lot less, and then third quarter opens up, and it's like, holy shit, we're gonna do it, and then we did it,
Yeah.
and it
See,
was
whereas
just,
I was the other way around. Like, start of the game, I'm like, oh, pick six for Minka Fitzpatrick. Oh, sack for TJ Watt. Oh my God. Joe Burrow's just getting destroyed out there. And
yeah.
honestly, if our offense could have gotten it going, we would have scored over 40 points.
And honestly, that was probably the Steelers' biggest downfall, is that their offense just couldn't get anything moving. And it's not like Trubisky played a bad game. He just played a really forgettable game.
It was too conservative. And, both him and Matt Canada did come out this week and they said that. They said, if we want to win in this league, we have to be more aggressive. Protecting the ball is one thing. We've done a good job of that so far, but we have to start taking shots down the field. We have to start opening up the playbook. Otherwise, teams are going to be able to just shut us down. We can't rely on the defense to go out and get 7+ sacks and 5 interceptions every week, because that's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. It is really one of those things where the offense, they need to be better. They need to start producing. Like, obviously, Najee Harris is a little bit banged up this week. I think he was full practice these last couple days.
Yes.
So
Yeah, they're planning on starting him.
which is good. They need him, and yeah, that's exactly what you need to see from the Steelers. They need him out there, because again, no, Najee Harris, Trubisky is not going to have a run game to rely on, and I don't think Benny Schneill is really the option there. who's going
Well, I
like
mean,
he's a decent back, but he's no Najee Harris.
Snell's even lost that number 2 spot to Warren. I can't remember what his first name is, but he undrafted rookie that made the 53-man roster. He's the guy that came in and replaced Najee Harris last week, and he did a serviceable job running. He's a very good north-south runner, but
Yep.
what was really impressive was his blocking. And so this sets us up to be able to run more 2 running back sets where maybe we're running it with Najee, but maybe, Warren's going to be in there being the primary blocker and Najee doesn't have to take as many blocking hits,
Yeah,
So
because that is something that he did a lot of last year.
yeah, exactly. And this opens them up to be able to rest Najee Harris a little bit more often and not have to have him in there on every single snap, which obviously that does create a problem where, teams see Najee Harris go off and Warren come in. They're going to go, oh, okay, this is a passing play.
Yep.
And so that's where we're going to have to still make sure that we're throwing some screens Warren's way.
Yes. Yeah. But so good news for the Steelers. But a team that I want to talk about is the Miami Dolphins versus New England Patriots. The Dolphins looked good. Granted, they only did win 20-7, but Tua, he looked really poised and good with his new number one weapon in Tyreek Hill. They were able to connect and they were able to play well with each other. And it was a good little game. New England, however, didn't look amazing. Like Mac Jones obviously getting hurt in that game. Still think he's going to be playing against the Steelers this upcoming week. But the Patriots didn't look amazing.
No, the Patriots didn't look great. I mean, I didn't see a lot of that game myself or even the highlights, but I mean, the bits I saw, there were flashes of it from Tua, but I mean, I also saw some of those typical accuracy issues from Tua, and so great against a New England team that's sort of in a bit of a retool rebuild phase right now. You're going to get away with that. But you go up against some of these better defenses in the league, like the Chicago Bears, they're going to eat Tua alive, like the Bears, the Bills, the Steelers, like especially a ball hawking defense like the Steelers, like that.
Yep.
I can't wait till we play them.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Tua and his accuracy, according to Tyreek Hill, he is the most accurate quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, I don't buy that.
Yeah, but going over to another quarterback in Lamar Jackson, dude came out and said, "Fuck you, pay me." Like he was throwing to wide receivers, and he was making it look good. And you're sitting back going like, "Okay, hold up. Who replaced Lamar and who is playing quarterback? Like what are we seeing right now?" Granted, it was against the Jets who got 9 points, but you're sitting back going like, doesn't matter who Lamar's played against in previous years. He ain't throwing to wide receivers like this. Like this was probably one of the best outings I have seen from Lamar Jackson in terms of passing in a long, long time. And it was one of those things he's literally looking at the Ravens going, see, this is why you should pay me. And Chiefs versus
we discussed.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, we discussed this a couple weeks ago when we were talking about them shutting down the contract negotiations. We said this is what Lamar Jackson has to do.
Yeah,
he has to show that he can be a quarterback and not a runner.
Yes.
Because too often it would be target 1, target 2, which were typically my wide receiver 1, my tight end, and then I'm running.
Most of the time it was tight end 1, tight end 2.
Right. And so now he's standing in there. He's going through his progressions before letting it break down.
Yeah. Which, if this is the Lamar Jackson we are going to see continuing on in the future, that's going to be a very good, Baltimore Ravens team, because that was really what he was missing throughout his entire career so far.
Yes.
Obviously, he has the running ability. He can throw it to a tight end, but if he can start making something out of nothing with the receivers that he has, and it's not like they don't have a decent receiver in Rashawn Berryman, who they drafted in the first round a year ago. Like I was really excited about that guy. It's just the offense really didn't work around with that. But if they can make that to the point where that offense utilizes these types of guys, come on, man. Like that, it's going to be scary it's going to be scary. But
I'd like to see him go up against some more difficult defenses at this point. Like, yes, I know the Jets drafted Sauce Gardner, and he's a great cornerback, but
that's not enough.
Exactly. I'd like to see him go up against, the Bengals defense, or, the
Steelers
Bills
defense. Yeah,
exactly.
Those like 49ers defense, like a proper team, a proper challenge at that defensive spot. But a team that I want to talk about is the Philadelphia Eagles, almost allowing the Detroit Lions to beat them. Like Jalen Hurts, he looked good, but the Eagles defense did not. Like the Lions are a vastly better team this year. Like,
yes,
they are competing.
Even last year, we said they are the best winless team we had seen up to week 10. They kept losing, and we were like, how? They just found ways to lose. They were not a terrible team last year.
Well, yeah, the Ravens had to kick like a 66-yard field goal at the end of the game to win. And of course, Justin Tucker, you asked Justin Tucker to make a pressure kick. He's going to deliver. It doesn't matter if it was a 70-yarder, you would have made it, pretty sure, in that game as well. But yeah, the Lions, they're just one of these teams. They're well coached. So for them, obviously a well coached team is going to help you along and get you definitely some of those, tough victories. They just couldn't quite sneak one out in that one particularly. But yeah, definitely a better looking Lions team this year. But yeah, Eagles, if they want to stay competitive, they need to figure out that defense, because it kind of looks like it's their division to lose at the moment, with obviously the next team we're going to talk about here is the Cowboys playing a terrible game against the Buccaneers and ultimately losing Dak Prescott for what could be 4 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, minimum 4 weeks.
Yeah, which is going to be very, very interesting to see. Excuse me there, but yeah, the Buccaneers, they didn't play amazing. They did everything they needed to do to win that game, but to win 19-3 with how bad the Cowboys were in that game, it's one of those things you kind of go like, all right, Bucks, you should be a lot better than what we saw on that. Like, granted, the Cowboys do have one of the best, and I think now what we're going to probably consider is the favorite for the defensive player of the year in Micah Parsons, with TJ Watt being out. It's one of those things where you're looking at like, okay, like you should be able to do better than what we saw. But yeah, it was a phenomenal week one. Oh, before we move on, we got to talk about the Denver Broncos losing to the Seattle Seahawks. Like, the Denver Broncos were really the Denver Donkeys in that week's game, because how do you go into Seattle and lose to the Seahawks with the
it's
team
like Nathaniel Hackett thought he had Justin Tucker as his kicker?
Yeah, no kidding.
Right? And like, instead you're throwing a guy out there who has consistently missed from beyond 60.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like, this guy has constantly, he's never made something past like 56 or something like that. I think is what it was. And it's like, you're asking him to make a 64-yard field goal. And then that whole thing is like, he had timeouts with like 15 seconds left. He calls it. It's like, dude, your players don't want to be out there. The fans want this game to end. Like, seriously, just don't be a jackass.
Yeah.
And don't call your timeouts. Like, you're not going to win the game. Like, no matter what you do.
He was mad at himself, because he should have called a timeout as soon as it got to 4th and 5, so that they could get a play together and let Russell Wilson try to win that game. That's what they should have done. But he didn't. He let the clock run down to 20 seconds and then kicked a misguided field goal and then threw a temper tantrum by using his timeouts to delay the game.
Which was just such a dickhead type of move. It's like, I get it. You're frustrated. We've all been there where we're mad. But, like, the players didn't want to be... Like, his own players are looking at him like, really?
Well, what's the point? It's victory formation. You can only stop the clock twice. Like, there is 0 point in doing that.
Well, it's like one of those things where, like, what was he expecting? Was he expecting, like, Geno Smith to somehow fumble the ball, pick it up, and throw a pick six?
Right?
Like, on victory formation, where it's like, even if it is a bad bobble snap, it's one of those things that goes on the ground, Geno Smith falls on it, and like I don't know what he was expecting. Like, even if you're pissy about it, like, that's such a bad way of going about that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
moving over to our Thursday night football game, this was a game that I was expecting to be very, very high scoring. Like, I know we talked about it last Sunday, where it was we were saying it could be a game where we see it's like that Chiefs Rams game a couple years ago, where they get into that 50+ mark for both teams. And both defenses really showed out. Like, the offenses looked good, but this was a really strong defensive battle. It doesn't necessarily look like it on the score sheet when you see 27-24. That's just how good these offenses are. And the fact that it wasn't more just shows how good these defenses for both teams were.
Yeah, it was absolutely insane. And the Chargers had control of the game, in my opinion, right up till halftime.
Yeah.
And it really speaks to what this Chiefs team is going to be able to do this year. Because we saw it in week 1, where it was Patrick Mahomes' game. He went out there, threw 5 touchdowns, ran up the score. That was his game to win. Whereas this week we saw the Chargers sort of in control, good, solid defense, controlling the pace of the play. And Andy Reid went in at halftime and changed their game plan. He adjusted appropriately, as we know Andy Reid is capable of doing. He's one of the best coaches in the game. And he came out there and he said, okay, so we can win games Patrick Mahomes' way, but we can also win games my way. And that's exactly what he did. He dialed up the defense. He got them fired up and made some spectacular plays.
Yeah.
But it does help that Justin Herbert go down with a bit of a rib injury. I believe he's day-to-day now, so we don't know if it's going to progress to anything more. But you could tell in the fourth quarter there.
So he'll be good.
Yeah, you could tell. There were a couple times where, he rolls out to try and make something happen and just has to throw it away because he grabbing his ribs. He was too much pain.
Well, yeah, I particularly remember it was like that last drive where that's kind of where we saw the big injury happen, and then he gets back out there, and he's running on a play where it's a third down. If he just continues to run, he's gonna get the first down, but he's in so much pain that he just literally tosses the ball out. Then the very next play throws a 30-yard dime for a touchdown.
Yeah.
You're just like, all right, cool. So you must have not been in that much pain, because 30 seconds later you did that. But it was a very, very interesting game to watch for sure. Funny enough, there was a bet that was going around. It was if Mike Williams, who had a phenomenal game, he was lights out. If he and Clyde Edwards-Helaire both got 3 touchdowns in the game, it was 1 to 1,000 odds.
Wow.
So, of course, I'm putting a $1 bet down on that, because if that happened, quick, easy $1,000, so obviously you're only going to put very small amount. You're not going to be doing something crazy like 1,000 to try to get that million, but
and that is a factor that we need to consider when we come to this game later in the season for the rematch is, will Keenan Allen be healthy? Will Keenan Allen be playing? Because that does add another dynamic dimension to that Chargers team. Not having him there, everybody knew it was going to be Mike Williams.
And yet they still couldn't stop him until the second half.
Exactly.
Mike Williams really disappeared in the second half.
He did, but I think that's credit to Andy Reid and the way he adjusted his defensive game strategy.
Yes.
He went in. He went in with his normal plan, saw that Mike Williams was tearing up, and was like, okay, we've got to change something here. He's just burning us.
Yeah, and he really, really was burning those guys. It was a situation of where it's like he was always open, and if he didn't seem to be open, he got himself open. And it was a tough game. Like, Justin Herbert is an absolute warrior. Like, I think that is all that really needs to be said about that, is like the dude has just such a high level of toughness, because what he was going through is like he was on pain. He was fighting through pain every single play, but they just weren't there to get the win.
Nope.
But yeah, moving over to this week's game. So starting off, we have the Carolina Panthers versus the New York Giants. So Sterling, give us your thoughts on it.
Oh, well, I mean, I wasn't really impressed by the Panthers last week. It was a typical Baker Mayfield style game. He did absolutely nothing through the first 3 quarters. and then came out in the fourth quarter and was like, look, I can play football all of a sudden, but it wasn't enough to even beat his former team of the Browns. And so I expect really to see much of the same this week out of him. I don't expect to see very, very much good at all coming from Baker Mayfield this season overall.
So I'm assuming you're picking the Giants to win this game.
Yeah, you know what? They played well last week. They were good at game managing. Their new coach showed that he's got guts and he's willing to make those risky calls. And Saquon Barkley is making a case for comeback player of the year right now. He's in a contract year. He knows he has to stay healthy. Yeah, I think the Giants are going to just run wild on the Carolina Panthers this week.
Yeah, well, I do think the Panthers offense, like I think you're shitting on them a little harder than they need to. Obviously, it's not exactly like they didn't play perfectly. Like Baker Mayfield had a bonehead interception, but he also made a bunch of really, really nice passes. Obviously, that 75-yard pass to Robbie Anderson, I remember immediately tweeting out. So I wonder if Anderson still hates the fact that Mayfield's his quarterback with that situation, because he can have the ability to do that. And I think obviously, he still got there late, so he's still learning the playbook. Like, I think that's something that we need to remember, because he got there basically like a week before the first preseason game. So he's 4 or 5 weeks into this thing, not necessarily fully having a full grasp of the playbook. I think he's probably going to do better against the Giants this week. Obviously, the emotional side of thing of going up against your former team, I'm going to go with the Panthers on this one, just for the simple reason of, to me, I trust Baker Mayfield more than I trust Daniel Jones. And I think at the end of the day, Daniel Jones is going to hurt his team way more than Baker Mayfield could.
Fair. And I mean, if Baker Mayfield can settle down and get going earlier in the game, then yes, I agree. He has the potential to bring this team up. But like, even that 75-yard pass to Anderson, that wasn't until partway through the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Because I believe it was the first 3 quarters, he was under 50 yards. And like you can't be doing that in this NFL that is so pass heavy. It's not going to work. You're not going to win games.
Yeah, that one is always a tough one, just because looking at that, I'm just trying to see where that pass actually happened. Yeah, in the fourth quarter, like what you said there. But yeah, you need to be better consistently throughout the game. And obviously, this is the first real game experience Baker Mayfield has had fully healthy and with his actual offense. So it's a tough one, and we're going to be saying that a lot throughout this one. Is this was their first time through this and that. But
and until he shows me otherwise, this is going to be the way I keep reacting to Baker Mayfield. Because I got to see it a lot when he was with the Browns, and it's his MO. He just, all the stats he's built up over the years, it's because he's playing from behind so often. And when you're playing from behind, you're throwing the ball, you're taking chances.
Yep. Well, moving over to Baker Mayfield's former team, the Cleveland Browns versus the New York Jets. How do you have that?
This one, I mean, we saw the Jets last week got destroyed by the Ravens, and the Browns won that emotional game against their
you're cutting out here.
I think both these teams keep going. Am I cutting it out?
Yeah, a little bit, but you're back.
Any better?
We got you back.
I think these teams are going to keep going in the same direction, honestly. I expect the Browns to win this game pretty handily, and I expect the Jets to just be the Jets. And so I think the Browns are going to go 2-0 at this point and beat the Jets.
Which is insane for us to sit down and say that the Browns were going to be 2-0 after all the stuff that has happened. But yeah, I'm with you right on that. I think the Browns are going to ultimately beat the Jets, because no matter what you say, Joe Flacco, in my opinion, never was elite, never was that great of a quarterback. He did what he needed to do that year when he won the Super Bowl. But the Jets, they don't have much. Obviously, Sauce Gardner in the back end. but the Browns, they're just a better overall team. So I think we're both here sitting with the Browns.
Yeah.
Moving over to the Washington Commanders versus the Detroit Lions.
Oh, well, I remember, we talked earlier that the Lions came very close to managing to win one earlier this season, last week there. They did that a lot last year too, and the Commanders somehow pulled out an upset last week. I don't have faith in the Lions yet. They haven't shown me that they can win yet. They keep finding ways to lose games rather than finding ways to win. And, much like I said about Baker Mayfield earlier, until they give me a reason to think otherwise, I'm not going to be betting on them. And I think the Washington Commanders are going to beat them this week.
Yeah, I have the same pick as you. I'm choosing the Washington Commanders to win this game just because I do struggle with the Lions. Like when I look at Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, obviously same draft year, but to me they're both very similar. Like I don't trust either of them, but the Commanders have a much better built team than the Lions do. Like it's going to be a close game. Without a doubt, it is. Like the Lions, they're going to fight, but I like what you said there. The Lions aren't finding ways to win games. And last week, the Commanders, they found a way to win that game. They did, and yes, it was an upset against a team that isn't necessarily the best, but it's still one of those situations where I look at the Commanders and I go, I trust their coaching and the construction of their team a little bit more than what I do with the Detroit Lions. So now the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the New Orleans Saints.
Well, I know you were talking about the Bucs. They didn't look good in their win last week, but something we didn't talk about was there were a lot of these teams that didn't play very many of their starters through the preseason. So week 1 was sort of the first field action that a lot of them got to start building that chemistry. And even in that situation, Tom Brady made it look easy. Like, he didn't
Tom
put up
Brady
a lot of points,
decent,
but he didn't have to.
Yep.
Like he won like Tom Brady does. He goes out there, he manages the game, and he gets it done. And I know the Saints this week, I believe they're missing Alvin Kamara. He's not going to be playing. And I heard they might be missing another guy. I can't remember who, but I don't know. The Saints, they managed to come back and pull one out against the Falcons last week, but that is the Falcons. I think the Buccaneers are going to make short work of the Saints this week.
Yeah, you and I, third time in a row here today.
Yeah,
picked
it's not going to be as wide apart as that Bucs Cowboys game was, because Jameis Winston did show he is able to do some stuff last week. It will be closer. But let's face it, if Tom Brady has the ball in his hands last and the game's on the line, the Buccaneers will win.
Oh, without a shred of doubt in that. To me, I just look at the Buccaneers. They are a better team. Tom Brady has struggled against the Saints over his career, so this could be a potential upset. So, and we've yet to. I think we haven't seen Tom Brady actually beat New Orleans over his career. I could be very wrong on that, so don't take that to too much heart. But Brady has struggled against the Saints, both at his time in New England and with the Buccaneers. But I do view this as the Buccaneers. They are the better team. They should win this game. That's who my pick is. Funny enough, going back to what you said, is that the Buccaneers didn't play any of their really a bunch of their starters, but a stat came out that said teams that didn't play any of their starters last week all lost.
Yep.
Yeah,
yes, they did.
Which was absolutely crazy. But
I mean, crazy until you really think about it. It's the first field action for a lot of these guys, and so that's why I was sort of trying to play devil's advocate for Russell Wilson and and teams like that, because they hadn't really played together yet. And I think the team that we saw last week won't necessarily be the same team we see in week 2.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's going to be a lot of changes throughout from the first week to the second week. There always is. Yep. But next game up is we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, your Pittsburgh Steelers versus the New England Patriots.
Yes, one of my most hated rivalry games of the last 20 years, because it was always Big Ben against Tom Brady, and this is the first time where not going to see either one of those guys starting for either of these teams. Bill Belichick has been talking all week about how he's game planning hard against this receiver core because, he realizes you can't just shut one of them down and expect to win the game because somebody else is going to step up. So I expect this to be a really strong defensive battle, especially with Mac Jones in the week he had last week. We talked about maybe a bit of an injury, so Belichick might play it a little safe with him, not having him throw it down the field, especially now with, ball hawk Minkah Fitzpatrick. He was hyped up last week, and I think he's going to come in this week looking to do the same. So I think if it comes down to a battle of defense, though, it's going to be Pittsburgh winning out because they have the better defense overall. And this is one of those weeks where if our offense doesn't do too much, I don't think it's going to hurt us as much as it could have last week. There's no reason we should not have won that game last week.
No,
we scored 6 points off of what was a potential 28, which is not good enough.
No.
So I think this week we see a tight defensive battle. I don't think it's going to be very high scoring at all unless Mitchell Trubisky decides to, reach into his magic hat and go, I'm going to get aggressive this week and show what I can do without throwing any picks, hopefully. But I think the Pittsburgh Steelers will win this one and keep pace with the Browns, go 2-0.
Yeah, which would be insane to think that the Browns, Steelers, and Ravens would all be 2-0, and then the Bengals could potentially be 1-1. Obviously, we'll get to the Ravens and the Bengals picks a little bit later. I feel like I'm kind of potentially spoiling some picks, or maybe not, but we will have to go back later and see. But yeah, for me, I agree with you there. I think the Steelers are the better team. I looked at the defense from what we saw from the Steelers. They're going to tear apart that injured Mac Jones. Obviously, Steelers don't have TJ Watt, but Hightower was still able to get 3 sacks. And ultimately, I just think the Steelers are going to be the better team in this scenario.
I do too. This is going to be a coaching battle.
It is.
And if Bill Belichick is able to find some way to run the ball and beat the Steelers defense, which we saw last year was possible, and we have so far in the preseason this year saw it was possible. They did a good job of stopping Joe Mixon last week, other than 1 or 2 big runs. And so that was promising. If any coach in this league can figure out how to beat a Pittsburgh Steelers defense, it is Bill Belichick. Yeah. So I am still concerned about that. I don't think it's, cut and dry. Steelers are winning for sure, but I think they will be able to pull this one.
I fully agree with you on that one. Moving over to the Indianapolis Colts versus the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Man, we thought the Colts were going to be better this year.
We did.
Right? Like you went out, got Matt Ryan, and you couldn't even beat the Texans in the week 1. You play them to a tie, and now you're going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars team that you haven't beaten since 2015, 2016. The same Jacksonville Jaguars team that helped my Steelers get into the playoffs last year. And honestly, with how the Colts looked last week and how angry that Jags defense must be, I think we see them win again. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to, beat the Colts and start their trek towards being a winning team instead of that basement team in the AFC South.
As I do think the Jags are going to be better this week. They are. I also think the Colts offense is going to be better this week as well. I just don't think they had enough time and the chemistry wasn't necessarily there yet. Matt Ryan, we still know, is a good quarterback. I am going to go with the Colts this week, so I think this is now the second pick that we have different. Yeah. But from what I saw from the Jags, I would almost say that the Jags losing to who did they lose against to last week? Commanders. That's almost a bigger upset than the Colts tying the Texans. Like it's one of those things to me. I go, the Colts, they tied, yes, but we always see the Colts start off a little bit slow anyways from the years that we didn't see from Peyton Manning and even with Andrew Luck. I just feel like this is going to be one of those games that I'm going to be glued to because it's going to be a phenomenal game. But I am going to go with the Colts on this one.
That's fair. I just,
it's honestly a coin toss.
Yeah, the Jags are going to come off that loss to the Commanders angry, though, because they know they should have won that game. Whereas the Colts almost feel like they're just sauntering through the season at this point already. Like they're just going through their paces, going, a tie is what it is. And that Jags defense and front four is much better than the Texans was. And the Texans were able to sort of keep that Colts offense in check. And so what are the Jags offense going to do? What happens when they get to Matt Ryan a couple times and he starts getting a little nervous and then they start handing it off to Jonathan Taylor every single play and they can just, Tavon Austin can just get in there and knock some guys around.
It's going to be a phenomenal game to watch. But moving on to our next pick, we have the Miami Dolphins versus the Baltimore Ravens.
Yes. I know I don't think we talked about it on the show, but you and I were talking about Tua a little bit earlier and how his accuracy seems to be a little bit better. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid in Miami yet. I know Tyreek Hill is good and he's going to be able to make some plays for them, but they didn't really impress me beating the Patriots last week, whereas the Ravens came out like we discussed, and Lamar Jackson just dominated the Jets. Granted, bad Jets team, but I think we're going to see Lamar Jackson just continue on because the Miami defense is not top tier at this point. And I think he's going to be able to just keep going the way he has been. And this is a game in Baltimore, and Baltimore is a tough city to win in. I think the Baltimore Ravens come away with a win there and keep that trend in the AFC North of all the teams but the Bengals going 2-0.
Yeah, for me, I do look at the Baltimore Ravens, and I think Lamar is a man on a mission this year. I think we could potentially see him fighting for that MVP title again. But the difference is from this year is that we're not going to see as much from his leg standpoint, but it's actually going to be from his arm talent. And then the Ravens are going to have to give him that massive contract because he's a 2-time MVP, if he ends up winning it. But I think it's going to be another one of those games that's going to be decently close just because obviously I still think Miami offense is really, really good. And they have a lot of weapons that they can move around. And their new head coach, very, very bright young mind, offensive head coach. So I do like what I've seen from that. But for me, I'm also going with the Ravens on this. But moving over, we have the Atlanta Falcons versus the LA Rams.
I mean, do we even need to talk about this one? It's a wash, man. There's no way.
It really should be.
Yeah, there's no way I can see the Falcons beating the Rams. The Rams have got to be upset about that loss last week at home to the Bills on opening night. And they've had an extra few days to prepare for this, which, I mean, the only thing that could be said is, are they maybe looking ahead? Are they, if they don't take the Falcons seriously and they go, okay, well, who do we got next week? And they start thinking about that game instead, that could hurt them. But, well, to see how Matt Stafford is, I think there's a lingering injury issue there that they're not disclosing because he did not look sharp in that season opener. And I think we'll have to see what happens with the Rams going forward. That being said, I do think the Falcons is going to be an easy win for them. I think the Falcons are going to be the team we talk about this year, about possibly going down the road to 0-6, 0-7, and then it'll be, will they win a game? Won't they? Yeah, but I think the Rams win this one pretty easily, which could be good. Maybe that gives them a chance to sit down Matt Stafford if they're up by enough points and get him some extra rest.
Yeah, obviously they opened up the year on that Thursday night game against the Bills, so they've had a ton of rest time. It feels like forever since we actually saw that game. I think by the time it reaches tomorrow, it'll be 10, potentially 11 games or days in between games, which obviously will get them to hopefully have a lot of time to prepare for the Atlanta Falcons, which is a weird thing to say going into this year. You need 10, 11 days to prepare for the Falcons, but they honestly do need to, take this game seriously because they didn't look great. Matthew Stafford, he looked at his offense and said, I'm throwing to Cooper Kupp and no one else. And whenever he tried to throw to anyone else, didn't work. And they just looked like Matthew Stafford looked like he was back with the Lions. But yeah, I agree with you. It has to be the Rams have to win this game. Like they should.
Yeah.
If they don't, well then boy oh boy do we have an issue in LA if they can't beat the Falcons. Moving over to another divisional rivalry game, we have the San Francisco 49ers versus the Seattle Seahawks.
Yes, and we talked a lot about that Monday night game the Seahawks played against the Broncos. Much like the Baker Mayfield, it was a very emotional game for the Seahawks as well as Russell Wilson. They came out fired up.
Yes.
But they also had the home field on their side, booing Russell Wilson, getting loud. And on the other side of this, the 49ers had a sloppy game in Chicago. That was some disgusting weather for Trey Lance to be playing his first game of the season in. I think we see a very different 49ers team this week. I think so too. If the weather is nice in San Francisco, which usually it is, I think we see Trey Lance do all the things that the 49ers thought he was going to be capable of. And we don't see the Seattle Seahawks pulling off another upset this week. I think the 49ers handle the Seahawks easily. The Seahawks also, they lost Jamal Adams. He had surgery this week. So that is like the cornerstone of their defense, their secondary, which just opens things up for Trey Lance and Deebo Samuel.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately for Trey Lance to open up his season this year, he played in a game that he will never play in again. Like that weather was ridiculous. It was something else. Like Justin Fields was saying, like, he's happy he got to play in that. He's happy he got to win in a game like that because that type of situation, type of field situation, game never happen again. Both of those guys will never experience that type of torrential hurricane like downpour in a football game. So it should be interesting to see what Kyle Shanahan is capable of doing, hopefully in a bright and sunny San Francisco, and I think with the emotions last week for the Seahawks, like you listen to the way Pete Carroll was talking this week about how the Seahawks were able to go out there and beat Russell Wilson. Like it meant a lot to them. And it kind of now feels like that they've got all that steam out. Like I felt like they kind of used all of their steam just on that one game to go beat Russell Wilson. So yeah, I think the 49ers are going to absolutely slap the Seahawks. It's not going to be a close game.
I would love for the Seahawks to prove me wrong though.
I would
Geno
too.
Smith was a promising prospect when he first got drafted by the Jets back almost 10 years ago now.
Yep,
been ages.
Like 2012, 2013.
Yeah. And it is good to see him finally get that starter position and have some success in it. I don't know if without the emotion being around it, whether the rest of the team will be able to rise up, and without having the 12th man, out there screaming their heads off, loudest stadium in the league.
Yep.
I don't know if they're going to be able to have the same results.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong. Like
I would love to see the San Francisco 49ers go 0-2 because then the conversation is going to be, well, like, okay, well, is it Jimmy Garoppolo time? And I would love to see just the absolute cluster that would just decimate that San Francisco 49ers team, because this is a team that has Super Bowl aspirations this year. And if they go 0-2 against the Bears and then the Seahawks, teams that people are saying we're going to be some of the worst in the league, go out and beat them.
Yep.
Well, you better believe Kyle Shanahan's head's on the chopping block, their GM's head's on the chopping block, and it is, rather entertaining. But the team that just lost to the Seattle Seahawks, the Denver Broncos versus the Houston Texans.
Yes, well, I mean the Texans coming off a god gift of a tie against the Colts that should have beaten them easily. We've talked about this, much like the Falcons. I don't expect much out of the Texans this year. And as hard as we were on the Broncos, that was Russell Wilson's first action with them.
Yes.
I think we're going to see Russell Wilson calm down now that the emotions aren't there. Is this in Denver, this game as well?
Taking a look.
It is, yeah. It is in Denver. And so home opener for them, which will give them the crowd on their side. I think we see a different outcome. As long as Nathaniel Hackett reins himself in and starts managing the game properly. He's gone from an offensive coordinator to now you're the head coach. Now you're in charge of making sure that, you're keeping an eye on the clock. You're keeping an eye on your timeouts. You're running the appropriate plays in the right situations. These are your jobs now. It's not just, I got to get the offense going.
Yeah.
So
and maybe not being an absolute jackass at the end of the game.
He's got to be better at managing the clock, and he's got to have more trust in his quarterback. Yep. You're a rookie head coach with a veteran quarterback who is one of the best to play the game. You need to put more trust in him and stop trying to take it all on your shoulders, because otherwise you're going to be out of a job and he's still going to be the quarterback next year.
Well, yeah, it's one of those things. You traded 3 first-round picks and gave away half the fucking team to go out and acquire this guy.
What, a $215 million contract?
Yeah,
something like that. So
you need to be able to trust this guy.
Yes, yeah. Put the ball in Russell Wilson's hand and let him do what he does.
Next up, we have the Las Vegas Raiders versus the Arizona Cardinals.
And this is one of the hardest ones for me to choose this week, honestly, because both of these teams need bounce back games. Both these teams came in with big aspirations this season. The Cardinals knew that they were in a tough division. They've got to keep pace with the Rams. And, the Rams and the 49ers, and apparently now the Seahawks,
Yeah.
But they fell flat against a KC team that just destroyed them last week. Yeah. They need to put that game out of mind and move forward and refocus their game plan. James Conner had some good runs that game. If you can't get it going with Kyler Murray in the passing game and without D-Hop, then stick to your running game. Stick to clock management. Start controlling the game that way until you've got that full receiving core back. You lost Christian Kirk as well, so that was your number 2 guy. Like they're having some growing pains in the passing offense right now. And then on the other side of it, the Raiders, we expected big things from them, and they got beat up by the Chiefs or the Chargers. Sorry, Khalil Mack came out and got 3 sacks that game.
I think there was 7 total sacks by the Chiefs or by the Chargers.
Yeah. But I mean, 3 by Khalil Mack himself. And, that was against, of course, his former team in the Raiders. So he was happy to be doing that.
His good buddy, Derek Carr.
And we didn't see that chemistry that we expected between Carr and Devontae Adams. I think
we did see that chemistry. It was just that Carr was focusing on always trying to get Adams the ball.
Yeah. It's not so much that we didn't see the chemistry. We got to see how much of a downgrade Carr is from Aaron Rodgers, because we saw some of the same routes being run by Devontae Adams that he would run with Aaron Rodgers, and Rodgers was hitting him right on the money. And there were passes where I saw Carr underthrowing, overthrowing, and Devontae Adams almost going, "What did I do? Was this worth it just to play with my friend?"
Well, Derek Carr still had a pretty decent passing game, throwing for 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then Devontae Adams, 17 targets, which is the big thing there. 141 receiving yards and a touchdown. But for me, the biggest thing that week 1 is that obviously 17 of the 37 targets that Carr threw were at Devontae Adams. Like, he needs to diversify it a lot more. I 100% still think that Devontae Adams having 141 receiving yards and a touchdown, that's a game that he would easily have had with Aaron Rodgers. He could have had a lot more, but I think for Carr, he needs to realize that he has Darren Waller, he has Hunter Renfrow, he has Josh Jacobs. He needs to take away the idea of solely going to his best friend that they traded a couple picks to go out and get, and go, you know what? Devontae Adams is such a great decoy. We can have Waller out there who they just paid, and then Hunter Renfrew who they paid this offseason. It's one of those things. You have these guys. I think this is going to be one of those games where we're going to see Devontae Adams still have a big day, but Derek Carr is going to throw 4, potentially 5 touchdowns because he's diversifying it and he's getting it out where it has to be. And plus, the Cardinals do not have a good pass rush. So that's another bonus for Derek Carr.
And yeah, I agree that you said it perfectly. He needs to diversify because yes, Adams could have had that same stat line with the Packers and Aaron Rodgers, but that would have been on 8 targets, not 17 targets. That's the difference. And that's what it is. He needs to figure out, okay, like the ones that are working with Adams, great. We need to cut that 17 down and spread the ball around. And if he does that, then yes, they will be much better. And it's a much weaker defense, in Arizona than what the Chargers have. The Chargers even held Patrick Mahomes to 1 touchdown in the first half on Thursday night here. Yeah. So, I do think the Raiders are going to have the bounce back game this week, not the Cardinals. I think the Raiders are going to win this one, and probably, as you said, with a blowout.
Yeah, and then our last 2:30 game, we have the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Dak Prescott-less Dallas Cowboys.
And if it were not Dak Prescott-less, I would say the Bengals might be going 0-2, just because of the fact that they had real trouble protecting Joe Burrow last week, and now they're going up against another one of the premier, not just pass rushers, but diverse, unique players in the league right now who can play anywhere. And I think they're still going to have trouble. I think Joe Burrow is still going to get beat up a little bit, but let's face it, the Cowboys only put 3 points up against the Bucs. They're going to be lucky to get 3 points against the Bengals.
Yeah, and did you hear what Jamar Chase was saying about Trayvon Diggs?
No.
He was bashing him. He goes, he has no respect for him. He goes, this is a guy that, he'll get you a lot of interceptions, but he's hit or miss. Like, he's either going to, be able to cover you, or you're going to get burned by him. And that's exactly what we saw from Trayvon Diggs last year. Yeah, he got a lot of interceptions, but he also led the league in passing yards allowed. And he looked no better last week either. And if anything, he looked worse because he didn't get any interceptions against Tom Brady. And I really do not think that the Bengals are going to allow the Cowboys to touch Joe Burrow this week. I think it was one of those things of going like, okay, we let you down. We are not going to allow this. Like Joe Burrow has to be slapping all of his own linemen going like, if you leave me sackless this game, each of you gets $5,000. Like if I was Joe Burrow, I'd be bribing these guys with money every single week going, you need to protect my ass. But yeah, I agree. I think the Cowboys, now that they don't have Dak Prescott at the quarterback position, you cannot give the ball to Zeke and Tony Pollard like 60 times throughout this game and expect to win. I don't care if Zeke rushes for 230, 3 touchdowns. It's not going to be enough.
No, and I think Joe Burrow's slapping himself a little bit more than he's slapping the O-lineman. I think he still gets sacked at least 3 times this week, possibly as many as 5. But I don't think he throws 5 interceptions.
Yes.
That's going to be the key. I think he will protect the ball this week. He'll take those hits. He won't get panicked like he did against that fired up Steelers defense. I think it just that first pass when Fitzpatrick picked him off and took it back for 6, I think that just rattled Joe Burrow, unfortunately. And he started trying to do too much the rest of the game. And that was when we started seeing those ill-timed passes that he was just getting picked off again, and one of them, granted, was closer to a fumble than an interception.
Yeah.
But either way, I think Joe Burrow will do a better job at protecting the ball this week. I don't have faith in the offensive line to do a better job at protecting him. The only factor that he's got is there's only really one real big guy there that I think will get some sacks against him, whereas the Steelers had a lot of pass rushers who like to get sacks.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think Bengals, easy work of the Cowboys in this game.
Yeah, you and I are pretty much in agreement here. Now moving over to the Sunday night football game where we see my Chicago Bears head into Cheesehead Land where they face off against the Green Bay Packers.
And they send the Green Bay Packers packing and make them 0-2. Honestly, the Bears, they had such a tough, gritty win that they grinded out against the Niners last week, a game that nobody expected them to win, except for me. Once I saw the weather last week, I said the Bears were going to be able to take that once I saw how rainy it was. But that has got to be such a big confidence builder for somebody like Justin Fields. Because like you said, he said he was glad to be able to play in that game. He was glad to be able to pull out a win, but he's got to be going in and going like, okay, I was able to do these things in this horrible weather. Now I'm going into like a horrible environment where everybody hates me. And this guy has been saying he owns this team for the last decade. I need to change this. We need to own the Packers now. And I think Justin Fields is going to step up and he's going to have probably one of the best games of his career up to this point. And he is just going to pick that Packers team apart. And that's just on offense. Your defense looked really good last week as well. Roquan Smith is playing for a contract right now. And is it Jaquan Brisker that you guys drafted?
Safety, yeah.
Yeah, he's looking good, man. I think he has the potential, if he keeps going the way he is, to be a defensive rookie of the year. Like, he's looking good already, and that's only one game, and that's a sloppy, rainy game. I think when he can keep his feet under him and not be slipping and sliding on the field, I think he's going to just change that secondary.
I appreciate your sipping the Kool-Aid for the Bears because I am not. I think the Bears lose this.
Yeah.
Like, we saw Rodgers have a horrible game. He was frustrated the entire time. He basically had no one to throw the ball to, but we saw last year the Packers play horrifically in week 1, and then the next week, then the rest of the year they were just dominant. Obviously, Rodgers does not have Devontae Adams, but I'm not ready to start sipping the Kool-Aid for my Bears again yet. Again, fuck the Packers. I'm with that all day long. Like, I hate the Packers and I want to see them lose every single time, but I don't know. I need to see the Bears beat the Packers. It's been Aaron Rodgers has like a record of like 20 something to 3 against the Chicago Bears his entire time. I need to see the Bears beat Aaron Rodgers and the Packers.
I would love against Aaron Rodgers were like my Steelers against Tom Brady.
Yeah,
I feel your pain.
It's just not a good record. It's one of those things. I can't say the Bears are going to win this game until they prove me wrong. Like, again, last week I was not very fond of saying that the Bears were going to win this game. I've again, like I say, I'm always a guy that looks at my team and goes, they're going to be a lot worse than what they are because I've been hurt way too many goddamn times. And this is one of those things where I'm going into this week going, you know what? It's on primetime football. It's primetime Aaron Rodgers playing against the Chicago Bears. The Bears aren't going to win this game.
Fair. Well, I mean, I think you're going to have a good Sunday night then, because I think they're going to surprise you.
I sure fucking hope so.
Yeah, I think they're going to surprise you, man, because I'm getting some strong Eric Cartman vibes off of Aaron Rodgers this year. I think he's just going to start throwing tantrums and screw you guys. I'm going home. Like,
I hope you're right. I really hope you're right. Like, I want to agree with you so much on that.
He was not off last week. He was not. His passes were still in the same spots they always are. He was not missing the mark. It was the rest of that team around him. And in years past, he can raise those guys up. All I've been seeing him do is shit on them so far. And that is not how you raise your teammates. And I think he's going to just screw himself in this way. And he's going to get himself booed out of Green Bay to the point where he either has to retire or go and play for the New York Jets like his buddy Brett Favre did.
Wouldn't that just be amazing to have Aaron Rodgers? But if we saw that, that means that Aaron Rodgers goes, plays for the Jets, retires again, then plays for the Vikings, and then that would mean that Jordan Love turns into a Hall of Fame quarterback. So I don't want that to happen. Let's not repeat history here. Let's not
No,
repeat.
no,
I don't need a
that's not gonna
third
happen.
fucking generational talent at quarterback for the fucking Packers. I don't need 40. I don't need another 20 fucking years of these goddamn fucking people dominating my goddamn team. I
Hey
need you
man,
to
if
stop
Justin
trying to
Fields
repeat history.
if Fields can keep improving, you might finally have a record-breaking quarterback. What was it? You don't have a quarterback who's passed for over 5,000 yards or something, 4,000 yards.
4,000. We're
Yeah,
the only
you,
team in the NFL.
maybe you finally have one.
31 out of the 32 teams have a quarterback who has
Yeah.
passed for over 4,000 yards. The Bears, being the oldest team in the history of the NFL, don't. It's like, what a fuck you to the fan base.
Right. Well, maybe you finally do. I mean, I'm not that high on him. I mean, you know me and Ohio State quarterbacks. They're not really passing quarterbacks in my opinion. They're running backs who throw the ball occasionally. That's how I feel about Ohio State running or quarterbacks. But if Justin Fields can keep developing his game. He looked good last week in the rain. He looked good last season as he started getting more confident. I think they're going to beat the Packers this week and send the Packers 0-2.
I sure hope so. I would love it.
Yep.
But moving forward now to the Buffalo Bills versus the 0-1 Tennessee Titans. I feel like this is going to be a quick discussion.
Yeah, we were confused last week when we didn't get the Monday night doubleheader, but I guess it's this week. That's why.
Yep.
And so this is our first of the Monday night games in the Bills and the Titans. I mean, the Titans have something to prove. They lost to the Giants. Unfortunately, they're going up against Josh Allen and the Bills, who they had a game in that season opener, man.
Did they ever? Oh my
tore
God.
up the Rams. They made them look like a second-tier team. And Josh Allen went in there going, yeah, I should be in the top 3 talks for MVP this year. As much as I know you don't like him, I'm not the biggest fan either, but he's starting to show me more and more of this rhetoric we heard of him being a more mobile Ben Roethlisberger. I'm starting to see that. That stiff arm was pretty impressive for a quarterback. That being
Derrick
said,
Henry is like, damn, I should add that.
Right? That being said, we did discuss that the Bills cannot keep going forward with Josh Allen being their leading rusher. We saw the Ravens weren't able to survive that way. You need to start getting you guys draft for that reason. Oh yeah, I think we both were there for a second.
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah. But like that, they need to start getting that run game going. We saw it, Diggs and Allen, they've got a great connection. I can't remember who they've got for their number, Gabriel Davis as their number 2 receiver. Like he's phenomenal as well. So they've got a good passing game. They got to get that run game going. And then on the defensive side of it, Von Miller surprised me. I didn't think he was going to be that dominant in his first week there. We talked about him being one of the, if not the biggest bust going to a new team for a high price contract. And he played for his worth last week. If he can keep that going, man, this Bills team is going to be unstoppable. And I think they prove it this week by beating the Titans and going to 2-0.
Well, yeah, like the biggest thing with Allen is that he really is becoming that more mobile, big Ben Roethlisberger, which is scary because last week the 2 interceptions that he threw, obviously one wasn't his fault and one was his fault, but everything other than those 2, he was perfect.
Yep.
And the Bills looked at the LA Rams defense and said, we're going to turn you into our bitch. And the Titans do not have a defense on par with the LA Rams. So good luck, fellas. You're going to need it.
Yeah. No, I don't see this going in favor of the Tennessee Titans. And we're only into week 2 now. And I'm starting to think the Titans might end up being the first team that goes to their new drafted quarterback before any of the others.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. Because we thought, maybe it'll be Pittsburgh, maybe it'll be Washington. But at this point, both of those teams, as far as we're looking at, our prediction is they both go 2-0 this week. So you're not going to your backup.
Yeah.
Whereas the Titans are looking at possibly going 0-2. I think likely going 0-2 since they've got the Bills.
Yep. Our final game here on the docket for week 2, we have the Minnesota Vikings versus the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yes, and I think the Vikings are flying high. You know, they're sipping their own Kool-Aid, so to speak, because they beat Aaron Rodgers in week 1 and they did it easily. I think they're going to underestimate the Eagles because the Eagles almost lost to the Lions, and that is not acceptable. And as you pointed out, this is now their division to lose. Because yes, the Giants have a phenomenal running game and a great new head coach, but it's Daniel Jones. So will they be able to get it done? You know, Washington, they've got a decent defense, one of the better wide receivers in the league, but Carson Wentz is your quarterback. You know, the Eagles have all the tools in place. They have a great quarterback, great receiving core, and their defense is young. That was their real problem last week, was the defense was letting things down, and I think it's just inexperience at this point. Yeah. As this unit plays together more, they're very young. They're going to get that feel for each other, and they're going to start trusting each other more. And as that comes, this Eagles team is going to become well-rounded, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with in the NFC. And so I think the Eagles are going to win this game against the Vikings.
I cannot disagree with you on a lot of those things, what you're saying. I just think from what we saw from Justin Jefferson last week and how poor the secondary was from the Eagles, it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be another close game like it was with the Eagles and Lions, but I think it's probably going to edge out for Philadelphia.
Okay, so we agree there. It will be Philadelphia winning.
No, I meant Minnesota.
Because the only thing I was going to say is, remember, this is prime time. And Kirk
prime time Kirk.
Prime time, I like to throw interceptions, Kirk Cousins, on Monday night under the lights. Like, I don't think he's going to turn it around now all of a sudden.
You know what? Yeah, you've done enough to convince me in that regard. Like, Kirk Cousins, I do like Minnesota's defense as well, but it's primetime Kirk Cousins. Yeah, you're right.
If this was an 11 a.m. Sunday game, then I'd be picking the Vikings. But Monday night, last game of the week, Vikings, no, Eagles are going to take this because Jalen Hurts has played well in primetime.
Yep. He plays well under the lights.
He does. He plays very well under that pressure. Kirk Cousins does not.
Yeah. So getting closer to the end of today's podcast, thing that we like to do is rank our top 5 power rankings. So Sterling, who's in your top 5?
Geez, I hadn't really put a whole lot of thought into this week, honestly. Number 1 for sure, Buffalo Bills. The Bills have propelled themselves to that number 1 spot because they were so dominant. The Chiefs, easily number 2 up there. Despite their loss to the Chiefs on Thursday night, I am going to keep the Chargers in that top ranking as well. And I'm going to have them as my number 3. From there, the Bengals disappointed me. I think they're going to fall out of my top 5 this week. I'm keeping the Bucs in there. The Buccaneers, they didn't look great, but they got the job done. Geez, who for number 5? That is a tough one, man.
I feel like you're definitely going to pick the Atlanta Falcons.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's got to be them or the Texans, right?
Right, yeah. But yeah, while you think about that, I'll I agree with you. The first 2, I'm going to say, Buffalo, Kansas City. Tampa Bay. Then I'm going to propel the Baltimore Ravens up in that 4th spot.
Okay.
And then, that unfortunately, I do have to say my number 5 is going to be the Chargers.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, even that loss to KC on Thursday night, if we're not factoring that in because that's part of week 2, then the Chargers.
I think we should factor it in a little bit just because. But even then, it's like with that loss, they were still really good, really competitive, and it just shows how good both spot 1 and 2 are. That for me, my number 5 and your number 4 ranked team are. It's the fact that they have a loss on their record, but they're still in the top 5 because they're that good of a team. And let's be honest here. If it was any other team that wasn't named the Kansas City Chiefs or the Buffalo Bills, Chargers win that game.
Fair. That is true. That is true. Yeah, man, I'm having trouble picking a number 5. I can't say the Baltimore Ravens because they beat the Jets.
The reason that I choose the Baltimore Ravens is because Lamar Jackson put something on display that we had not seen from him.
Yeah.
And to me, granted, it was against the Jets. Yes, it was against the Jets, but that is something that we had not seen from him in a long time. And if he can continue that, that's why they're my number 5. I'm going to swap the Chargers and the Ravens. That's why they're going to be my number 5. Is because, granted, that's something that we haven't seen from Lamar Jackson, and we don't know if he can keep it up. But if they do keep it up, and you add in that ability to run the ball like he is, he's going to run away with the MVP award.
Fair. Well, you know what? I'll keep an AFC North team as my number 5. I lied. The Bengals can stay in my top 5 because you know what? That first week against Pittsburgh, they really should have won. And I don't think we're going to see them lose very many other games this season.
Yeah. I just look at that and I go, you know what? The 4 interceptions, the 7 or 8 sacks, the missed kicks. Granted, the kicks weren't really on the kicker. They were more on the lines of snaps not being able to get to where they need to be.
Well, yeah, it was like their 3rd or 4th string tight end that was doing the long snapping.
Yeah.
At the end.
So it just wasn't ideal. Again, they're not going far out of my top 5. It's just one of those things where this is a game that they should have won. There was just too many mistakes. Yeah, granted, week 1, but yeah, that is my top 5. And you're putting the Bengals back in there. I love how you refuse to put the Ravens in there.
The Ravens haven't proved themselves yet. If he goes out there and puts up another 25 to 30 points against the Dolphins and wins, then we'll talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you didn't want to put the Cleveland Browns in your top 5? They won.
Well, no, if I was going to do another AFC North team, it would have been the Steelers because they had hands down the best defense in the league last week.
Yes, they did.
Week 1, they were the best. And, if they can keep that turnover differential, they're going to win a lot of games this year.
I tend to agree with you in that aspect.
All 2, 3, 4.
Yep, I totally agree. But that is going to be the end of this week's podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining us here today on this beautiful Saturday afternoon. Remember to hit the like and subscribe button and to make sure to check out the videos that we are now posting throughout the week. And we will see you guys very, very soon.